Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Balie. My name is Veronica Baas, and tonight I will be talking with the wonderful Robert Menasse. And he's sitting here at the front row. And we will be talking about Europe, about literature, about European politics, mostly with Robert. But we will also be joined later on by cultural historian Ivona Guczk and Thomas Huttingham. The occasion of this evening, and we're very delightful that we get to host Mr. Menasse, is the Dutch publication of his book, Die Erweiterung, the Uitbreiding. And it tells many stories. And one of the two stories that it tells is the story of the friendship between two friends who were together in the Polish resistance and then 30-odd years later find themselves on two sides of a political dilemma. One is Prime Minister of Poland. He's against Albania joining the European Union. The other one is high up in the European Commission, and he is in favor of it and actually working towards it. And we will talk a lot about all those things and other things, but first let me say that this evening is brought to you in association with the Arbeiderspers, with the Austrian Embassy, with the Goethe Institute, and with UNIC Netherlands. And I would like to ask Daria Baumann from the Austrian Embassy to come forward. And why did you think it was... First, can you tell me why Robert Menasse is such a special writer?
Yeah. For me, in the first place, because I like him so much. And Robert and me, we know each other for many, many years. And I think it's the same for Michel. Huh? And he really is a great writer. And the last books he wrote, Die Hauptstadt, de Hoofdstad, and this one, Die Erweiterung, de Uitbreiding, they touched my real personal experience about Europe. And I'm quite engaged and convinced European. I'm working for the European, I'm the cultural attaché of the Austrian Embassy. I also work for UNIC, the European National Institutes of Culture, and more or less loose network of European cultural institutes in the Netherlands. And we organize events together. So this was a great opportunity to have this also not only as an Austrian event, but also as a European event, because everybody is looking forward, especially this year, when we have the European elections.
Definitely. Yeah. So you will start reading two fragments from the book. You will read them in Dutch, because tonight is a European night. We will hear a little bit in Dutch in the fragments. We might also switch to German sometimes, if that's happening, but we will start in English. Can you tell us a little bit about the translation and about the people who translated the work?
Yes. I think all former books were translated by late Paul Beers, who passed away, I think, 3 weeks ago. So, it's also a bit of a sad evening in memory of Paul Beers. But he knew himself that he wasn't able to translate this last book. So he himself, I just heard, asked Wil Boesten, also one of the famous Dutch translators of German literature, to translate this book. So the last book, this one, Welcome. Is translated by Wil Boesten.
Yes, so I would like to ask you to read a first fragment, and it's a conversation between those two friends I just mentioned. And in meanwhile, I'd like to ask Mr. Menasse to join me at the stage.
Yeah. First, I also want to mention that Robert Menasse is not also a great author to me, but I think in general it's not for nothing that he won a lot of prizes, and some years ago the German Book Prize, and for this, especially for this book, he won the European Literature Prize. Of course, for the European issue. So
no, thank you. We're very honored to have him here, Mr. Menasse.
Is deze aan? Ja. Polen, zei Matthäus, konden als katholiek land, en Adam was weer bij de les, geen belang bij hebben dat een land als Albanië lid werd van de EU. Een land waar 60% van de bevolking moslim was. 60% van 2 miljoen, zei Adam. Niemand heeft Europa ervoor gewaarschuwd Polen met zijn bijna 40 miljoen katholieken in de EU op te nemen. Waarom zou iemand daarvoor ons hebben moeten waarschuwen in het christelijke avondland? Vroeg Matthäus en glimlachte. Joden bijvoorbeeld, zei Adam. En Matthäus trok zijn wenkbrauwen op. Of boeddhisten, voegde Adam er snel aan toe. Of protestanten. Of ja, Europese moslims. Omdat door de toetreding van Polen het gewicht van de katholieken met het oog op de relatie... Matthäus maakte een wegwerpgebaar. We hebben het hier toch niet over zaken die strikt privé zijn. Tot welke god ik bid voor het slapen gaan. Hoe een ander bidt, mijn buurman. Iedereen moet geloven wat hij wil. Ik heb vrienden die Jood zijn. Adam schrok. Wat ik duidelijk wil maken is dat wij geen islamitische staat in de EU willen. Staat, begrijp je? En je weet toch dat Albanië, net als Turkije overigens, lid van de Organisatie van Islamitische Staten is. Maar het is een atheïstische staat. Maar je ziet er geen gesluierde vrouwen. Maar in Tirana zie je moslims alcohol drinken. Maar. Jij zegt 60% moslims vormen het probleem. Ik zeg je, 90% van de Albanezen wil lid worden van de EU. Heeft hoop, verwacht kansen. Kansen die helemaal niks met religie te maken hebben. Moslims nou. En het is een klein land. Een klein land, ja, daarvan ben ik op de hoogte. Dat is dan ook het volgende probleem. Als jij de religie dan niet als probleem ziet. Het land is zo klein dat het als markt oninteressant is. Maar het zou met zijn krap 2 miljoen inwoners wel een zetel krijgen in de Raad van Europa. Een stem die even zwaar weegt als de stem van Polen, met zijn bijna 40 miljoen inwoners. Dat is waanzin. Polen kan er geen belang bij hebben zulke landen op te nemen in de Unie, die dan samen met andere mini-staatjes ons Polen overstemmen of tegenhouden door middel van een veto.
So you've lived in the Netherlands for a bit, so maybe you understood the passage. This goes really right to the heart of the problem of the enlargement of the European Union, right? Mm-hmm. National states who think they lose interest. Why did you want to write about this?
Never ask a writer why he is writing about a certain topic.
Can I start again?
But by chance I'm able to explain it.
I was counting on it.
What is the interest of a novelist? He wants to tell how reality, how the living of persons, how the situation in his lifetime is organized. He wants to tell how it is going on. At least he wants to describe his epoch of his lifetime. I guess this is the interest of every interesting novelist in history of novels. And when we are asking us what is the specific, what is the typical, what is the specific condition of our lifetime, then you can think about it, and then you can realize that it is the European Union. It is the general situation which the general legal situation of European Union is producing and interfering in all of our lives. I guess the time is over where you can tell the biographies of persons, where you can describe situations and conflicts of daily life only in a national condition. And to say the truth, I was very surprised. When I got this idea, I was very surprised that nobody tried it before.
The European Union can be very intimidating. And when I started reading the book, I also thought, oh, this might be an intimidating book. And I was very happy that it wasn't at all. I loved it. It was very rich. There are so many different storylines. It's a love story. It's very funny. It's a detective story. It has so many different aspects. But as you said, this political tension really is at the heart of it. And if you allow me a little bit of semi-German etymology, in German it's called die Erweiterung, and that contains the word weiter, which means far away. How it's about Albania, which is quite far away from the Netherlands. It's a little closer to Austria. How far away how big can Europe become for us to feel it? Did Albania feel far away for you when you started writing?
Albania is far away because nobody knows nothing about Albania. Albania is very near because it's an important part of the Balkan conflict situation, which is interfering in European politics. Albania is part of our reality, and Albania is at the same time a kind of metaphor for something we don't know, but which is interested in coming in being part of the European Union. And if Albania wants to become part of the European Union, we should be interested. What kind of country is it? What kind of culture, of politics, of legal state is it? And fascinating for me, the first novel I wrote about the situation in Europe was the capital, die Hauptstadt. There I was in the center, it was in Brussels. Then in the second novel I went to the periphery. I wanted to see what is on the ends and on the borders of Europe, and what is going on in the countries who want to become member of the European Union. And it's very interesting that the states not being member of the European Union, they have fantasies, they have ideas, they have hopes, they have images of the European Union, and they are so attractive that they want to become member. And at the other side, we have member states of the European Union, and the people in these countries, for example, Poland or Hungary, they have images of Brussels and bureaucracy and so on, and they say, it's a mess, it is a problem, we want to go out, we break European law, we defend national interests and so on. If you want to understand what is the idea of the European Union, ask people who want to come in. If you want to know what is a complete crazy misunderstanding of the European Union, then you ask Hungarians. And in Albania, it was very interesting. They have hopes. What is interesting for me as a novelist is not the political and system constellation. What is interesting for me is the biographies of people. What do they hope? What are they doing to make their life? Why are they not able to fulfill their hopes? And you have to understand that everything what they do is determined by the general situation of the general legal state of Europe. It is interfering in all of our lives, if you know it or not. And
you say, as a novelist, I'm interested in the biographies of the people and how they... I found that the people you write in Albania, they are poets and sportsmen, and the people in Brussels you contrast them with are still a little bit technocratic, even though you make them very humane. And of course, are you working with this difference? What you say, in what kind of way do you feel that the legal circumstances influences people also when you write about them?
Everyone has his biography, yeah? And everyone has the experiences in his life conditioning then his further ways of acting and trying to fulfill his interests. But this I never heard before. Albanians are sportsmen and Europeans are bureaucrats.
But in your book...
She read another novel, that not mine.
Oh, the basketball player.
No, the Prime Minister of Albania is a former sportsman, a former sports hero of Albania, because he played in the national team of Albania, of the basketball team. And he became a legend. He became a real hero because in the last second of a very important game, he made a 3-point Wurf. Yeah? He became late, and at the same time he was, or he is, a famous artist. He is a painter and artist, and he's a very exceptional person. But he's the Prime Minister of Albania. Yeah. In his cabinet, there are working a lot of people. There are no sportsmen, for example.
Sure. No, I liked it because at some point you used the metaphor of the international rules of the joining the European Union, and you compare it to international sports games. And that, of course, is also one of the central tensions is in the book, where Poland is a member state of the European Union, not necessarily abiding European law, whereas Albania is trying to become a member and already abiding to a lot of the laws. Yeah. So I liked the sports metaphor where you explained it.
Yeah, but the basic contradiction is, and this is very interesting, and we don't read it normally in the daily newspapers, that, for example, a country like Albania or North Macedonia or Montenegro, you name it, in the perspective of becoming member of the European Union, they have to fulfill certain things in advance. For example, they are implanting European law, even not being member of the European Union. So Albania is working on the base of European law, is not member of the European Union, and Poland or Hungary are members of European Union, and they are breaking European law. These are contradictions which are very interesting for me, especially when I ask myself, what is this doing with concrete biographies, with concrete persons? Yeah? What is this? What are the consequences of it? And as a novelist, I only can say that you can describe and tell an epoch only by describing and telling life situations and biographies of concrete individuals, and to show how it isn't bad luck that this doesn't work in his life. Also, it has as well to do with the general situation and the law conditions of the continent. And this is the difference, for example, to situations 50, 100, 120, 150 years ago, where national conditions, national culture, national law was defining the biography of people. Now we are people with chances or people as victims in an European situation. And you have to try to tell it, and you have to try to understand it. And this is what I try.
And succeeding, well, I would say. I would like to ask Ivona Gučk also to join us. Ivona is a cultural historian specialized in transnational history and cultural encounters, particularly between Poland and the Netherlands. And she's able to tell us about these dynamics between Eastern and Western Europe. Welcome, Ivona.
I hope I'm able to.
I'm sure you will.
You.
So, this perspective of Poland, that is a member state that is breaking European law, that is, of course, the image that we have had of Poland for the last 5 years. It's now changing a little bit. How do you think that the European Union, or the idea of the European Union, has played out in national Polish politics?
What I like when Robert said, you ask about Albania, is Albania far away? Well, your answer was, it's far away because we don't know about it. And I think this is the truth for Poland in the 80s, in the 90s. I think if you ask someone in Brussels or in Amsterdam about Poland, not so many people would know. So this being excluded from the common political project makes the political project probably very desirable and very attractive. And Poland was once at this path, as Albania now, to have the ambition to join the European Union. And that's where the European Union was seen as the higher valuable achievement. So we started as a periphery, although deep in heart, that's actually my also experience, we felt part of European continent. So we also didn't feel like we have to aspire to become part. We just need to overcome some political, historical struggles. And this was a long route, a long journey from the 80s. We talk about 40 years now. In 2024, the enthusiasm for European Union was super high in Poland. I remember the parties and the balloons blue balloons, of course, with European stars on it. And the huge popular enthusiasm that we finally are accepted, that we are stepping over some threshold. What we have seen in the past years was indeed a country who realized, like, we achieved that, so we don't necessarily have to take care of it. And perhaps also a new generation which votes, a new generation of people who do not necessarily see the added value of Europe.
Yes. So this conflict is at the heart of the book, and also the fragments that we read is this people who see the added value of Europe in first place, and we will talk about that, but also people who see the added value of people joining the European Union. How would you say what the added value is? You say we need to be interested.
The basic mistake is already when you say, what is the added value for a state being member of the European Union? This is not the goal of the European Union, that certain states have special more profit or more values because of being member. The idea of the European Union is completely different. The idea of the European Union is the transformation of nationalism into European democratic society without national interests and national identity, based on the common sense of the European citizens. And I really have to say that I'm not able any longer discuss it. For example, now in Austria, I came from Austria, and now in June will be the election for the European Parliament. And the parties in Austria are defining their program for the election. And even the Social Democrats say, we guarantee a strong voice of Austria in Brussels. This is not the interest. We are interested in Europe, not in a strong voice of Austria. But that's childish. Yeah, that's crazy. The Christ Democrats say, we will defend Austrian interests in Brussels. What are Austrian interests? What should it be? What is that? Yeah. I guess I'm not sure, and I don't want to invent quotes, but I guess it was Jacques Monnet who said, national interests are the interests of national elites. And that's true. If it's not a quote of Jacques Monnet, then it's mine. Anyway, it is true. It is true. Yeah, it is true.
But all those national elites blame the European elites for going against their interests.
Who are the European elites? Who are the... I try to imagine a person who wants to make a political career. Let's say I, for example, it is unimaginable, but let's try to play it in our fantasy. Let's say I want to become Chancellor of Austria. Let's say I have really, it's difficult to imagine, but imagine I have the neurotic energy to make this career. But by a confusion of constellations and chances, and at the end, suddenly my party makes the majority at the elections, and I am the only surviving in this battle of this career. And suddenly I am Chancellor of Austria. And then I reached my goal. I wanted to become Chancellor of Austria. The first thing I do is I make a phone call to a printer. Please make these visit cards with my name and Chancellor of Austria. And at this moment, a secretary enters in my office and says, Mr. Chancellor, we have to prepare your trip to Brussels. And then I say, what have I to do in Brussels? And then they say, but you have a seat and vote in the European Council. But this was never my goal. This was never my idea. I wanted to become Chancellor of Austria. Yeah? And okay, what shall I do in Brussels? And then the people around me and the grounds of the party, they all said to me, it's very easy. You have to go there, you make a veto, then you come back and explain in the television, I defended Austrian interests. Because the unique thing which is interesting for us is Austrian voters. And this is the way how it runs. This is the system. Yeah? And the problem is we started to develop a post-national and transnational union on this continent because the founding fathers intended and understood that defending national interests at least at the end leads to war. France, Germany, and so on. The founding fathers of the European Union, they experienced and they knew in one lifetime, between birth and death, in one lifetime, 5 wars. They were living in the consequences of the Austrian-France War from 1871, then the First World War, then the occupation of Poland in Kiev, then the Russian-Poland War, then the Civil War, and then the Second World War, and then the completely destruction of Europe and the ununderstandable number of victims and the biggest crimes against humanity. And then they said, never again, never again. This was the beginning of the European Union, never again. And they said, how can we do it? And they said, the aggressor has been the nationalism, so we have to overcome nationalism. And the basic idea was to make a supranational institution. He's organizing certain basic things of the first 6 countries participating. And the idea was installing supranational institutions and overcome nationalism. This was the idea of the founding fathers. The next generation knew it more or less because the elders told them. Grandfather, tell me your experience. Ah, that's very interesting. And so you know that, yeah? Then they said, okay, we go a step or two steps or three steps further. And then came the next generation. And the next generation had not the patience to hear for the grandfathers. The next generation only saw, this is the situation. I don't know why we have this funny institutions like European Council, but I have to go there from time to time to do okay. Yeah? And I said, okay, is it the situation? We can't go back, but I don't know how to go further. It is as it is. This was the generation Merkel. And then the next generation says, it has so many contradictions, it has so many problems, it isn't working. The people in my home country are impatient. They say it is not that they don't want to have this funny thing like European politics. They want to have national politics. They want to be protected by national politics. And I can win elections only when I say I defend national interests. Okay. And in this moment, the contradictions of the European systems begin to block every possible solution. And the problem is in exactly this situation, all problems, every crisis, the poly crisis, everything which we have to manage now is transnational. Exactly in the moment when every crisis is transnational, the politicians think I win elections only with national promises.
But then we have Poland, and I don't want to go as far that the new government isn't national or hasn't won on national accounts, but it is not as nationalist as the former government.
Well, I think Poland is quite specific when it comes to the euro. The idea of being part of Europe and why Polish people are still pretty enthusiastic about European Union, which is rather unique for one of the biggest countries in Europe. So neither the former government dare to say, they dare to put in the program that they want to leave European Union, because they know that the majority of society, of the population, will never vote for Polexit. So it is hardly imaginable in Poland. When people ask whether you said added value is not a good term, I wouldn't like to say this is in economic sense, the gain, but what, from my perspective, is important in the long history of Poland is that after 2004, for the first time, the borders for Poland became open. And as a country which was secluded and closed for many, many years, I grew up with an idea that passport is something unique, to have a passport even, but to just pass a border with a document, with an ID, and no one asking you about it. That was the added value shared for my generation. The fact that I can live in the Netherlands, study in the Netherlands, or go to Brussels, go on vacation within Europe without even having to say why I do it. The fact that I can live here as a Polish person in Amsterdam or in the Netherlands, work without giving up my citizenship.
This is an enormous advantage of the European system, isn't it?
It's a great gain. So this, from the historical perspective, I think this is one of the biggest gain on which Polish people realize we can be free. So the freedom connected to the free border, a free movement of people, is a certain myth and a certain idea that Polish people, at least, and I think it is true for majority of Eastern European, Central European countries, we like this idea of free movement, finally, after the years of occupation. And indeed, what happened with the last election shows that there is certain shift towards valuing the democratic fronts and democratic framework which European Union imposed on Poland, or keeps us slightly in check. So that's why a couple of months ago, 15 October, the majority of Polish population said, no, we don't give the mandate for this peace government anymore. Of course, I think you mentioned that, and you also mentioned that there is certain national interest. It is the way European nations probably redefine themselves, also in the face of the big conflict behind Polish borders with Russia, with Ukraine, between Russia and Ukraine.
But what has it to do with national identity, national interests? I don't understand it, really. The idea is completely different. Poland entered or became member of the European Union, for example. And I don't know if every Polish person knew it, but they should have known it. They entered in a trans and post-national development. And then they are member of the European Union, and then suddenly they discover they have so-called national interests. And nationalism became important and even more important and even more important in the running of time. It's hard to understand. And I have no answer how to handle it, at least. Yeah? But it is definitively the complete contrariety of what was the basic idea. We wanted a continent, a democratic, common, unified continent. Yeah? And if you open now the homepage of EU, the first phrase, the first line is, the European Union is the union of a democratic Europe. And I don't know if only one of you, of all of you, thought once about this question: what is European democracy? European Union has 27 member states and has 27 different, completely different democratic systems. What is the European democracy? The addition of 27 different democratic systems. Why not thinking about and discussing about how can a democratic, unified Europe can be a democratic Europe? Yeah. All these questions, nobody is saying now. Nobody is putting in into the discussion. Yeah. We have only the situation that national states are in a club defending national interests, call it European Union, yeah, and
the European Commission is
producing with vetoes and contradictions the impossibility to resolve a crisis. National heads, national chancellors and statesmen and presidents are going to Brussels, make a veto, coming back and say in the television, you see, European Union is not working. It's impossible. They can't resolve. We have to find a national solution. The national solution doesn't exist. But the people believe that a national solution has to exist. So they vote the Chancellor away. The next more radical nationalist, and he says, I will make the national solution. He can't do it. There is no national solution for the transnational problems. And then the people say, he wasn't consequent enough. We need a more radical nationalist leader. And this is the way into fascism. Yeah? And we have to discuss it. We have to understand it. We have to see that we have the choice between unification of the European Union, solutions all together for the polycrisis, or nationalism, disaster, misery, war, civil war, and the end of our welfare states. This is the choice.
But I think what maybe is important to add is that, of course, the problems are very transnational. However, the communication between the states, member states, is not really working. So if we want to find a transnational solution, we should be talking together. And I think perhaps in this 70 years of European Union, there has been not enough will also to reunify the nations and to let them talk. And actually, I'm thinking, because when I was preparing to this evening tonight, I realized it's exactly 35 years ago when the roundtable discussions were taking place in Poland. And it's so sad to see that Poland, after this 35 years, is totally polarized. And two parties within a country cannot really sit together behind a table and find a working solution to govern the country. So that means back then we were able to talk with the biggest enemy, the Communist Party. No one was actually supporting it, but the Communist Party sat together with the opposition at the table to discuss the solution for further. I think roundtable discussions for European Union, that's something to install, to make leaders, but also parties talk with each other.
Can you tell a little bit about what happened there?
So in just shortly before the end of communism, there were a lot of strikes going on in Poland in 1989. And of course it was also the end of perestroika, so the communist bloc was falling apart already. The Communist Party realized they cannot longer sustain their position as a ruling party. And they saw that the popularity of opposition is growing. So they invited the opposition leaders to sit together at a table and talked about workable solutions, looking for a compromise. In Polish history, it's quite a unique situation because Polish people tend to not like the compromise because they feel like compromise is a failure. But that moment created a moment of dialogue when two opposite parties sat together and they knew we cannot overthrow the situation, but we can try to find a solution to work towards the semi-free election. So the semi-free election took place 2 months later in June 1989. And the Communist Party said, okay, we give you a certain number of seats, and if you win the election, we can govern together. In the end, it was the end of the Communist Party.
What does this experience mean now for the future of the European Union, for the unification of the European member states? What does it mean?
I think the member states should talk with each other much more closer than just forming two blocks, the Eurosceptic and Euro-enthusiastic. Because it seems like, at least this is my realization, that the Erweiterung that took place in 2024 is partly seen nowadays as inflation of European Union, because a new unprepared member states perhaps joined the European Union with all the catalysts, national ideas, and they were unable to fit in. on the other hand, I think the entire world moved. So it is an interaction. And looking from the periphery, if you call it like that, or from the Middle Europe, Central Europe, the Eastern Europe, we can also say that these countries have grown so much closer to the idea of European Union. Even despite the last 8 years, maybe it's my optimism, but I also see still that the European law has so much more ground in Poland now than it has 30 years ago.
And it also seems like this courage to talk and to be, that is also what you are lacking, right? To break this cycle of becoming more and more nationalist, we need politicians who say that these are transnational problems.
We need politicians who understand the European idea, and I don't see them actually. But anyway, these are two different discussions. We can discuss it as a political discussion. What can we expect? What can we fear in the contemporary political situation of the European Union? And the other discussion is how can we tell what it makes with the people? Yeah, how can we tell the stories to show a panorama of our epoch? But when we really want to discuss it in a political sense, then we should start with basic information. What the founding generation dreamed and what the founding generation saw as a goal in the future, with little steps by steps, was in a surprising way realized till a certain point. Our great-grandparents never would have been able to imagine that we come from national markets to a single market, from national borders to a borderless European Schengen space, from national currency to a European common currency, from national universities to Erasmus universities, and so on and so on. This is, compared with the situation before, revolutionary. It is tremendous, successful. And then there was the cut with the new generation, which didn't have the interest and the stories behind of the founding generation. Yeah, and now we have only one problem in Europe. This is the basic contradiction between this development of nation states to unification of European citizens, as I showed now, and on the other hand, the national contradiction and the national interests stopping this development. And all crises are products of this contradiction. I give you an example. It was possible to make a common currency, the euro. This was a big step of integration in Europe. But then the national financial ministers of the member states said, but stop, stop it. I want to stay with the control of financial politics in my nation state, because if I accept this in his radical consequence, I don't exist anymore. They don't need a national financial minister. So the compromise was, we have a common currency, the euro, but we don't have a common financial politics. The euro is the first currency in the history of currencies without financial politics. And then we had the euro crisis. Is it astonishing? No, it is a simply consequence. Yeah? And then you can every crisis in Europe, you can lead back to this basic contradiction. We made a step forward in unification of Europe, but then we said, no, but basic interests have to remain in the sovereignty of the nation states. So it can't work. You can't be pregnant. You can be pregnant or not pregnant. You can't be a little bit pregnant. Yeah? And a little bit pregnant is the European situation.
You said there is a new generation that has lost the stories for Europe, but I think we found one who is from a younger generation and who has interest in Europe. And I've asked Thomas Huttinga to write a letter to Europe. And he has written a few books on Europe. Right now he wrote this letter. Thomas, can you please come and read your letter to Europe?
I would like to dedicate this letter to Mathieu Segers, who passed away last December and will be missed deeply. Dear Europe, let me share a dream with you. Let me share a dream of a continent full of vibrant cultures, a tapestry of different languages, traditions, and temperatures. A continent with a common past that you can recognize in its buildings, museums, music, and literature. From the musical sounds of Beethoven and Dua Lipa to the stories of Don Quixote and Tintin. Living in Europe is celebrating your holidays on the Greek islands or the Spanish Costa del Sol, a quick visit to Copenhagen, or a city trip to Krakow. And we may ask ourselves, has it ever been easier for today's generation of Europeans to study in another country or to be able to work, travel, or love so easily? From the Dutch to the Poles, from the Swedes to the Italians, we are working together on this common building called Europe. We are already living as Europeans. We, who live the dream of European unity and fraternity, a feeling that beats somewhere in the heart of every European. And look at the state of Europe in 2024. One member state decided out of discontent to leave the Union after a referendum. We see one crisis following another and a strong return of nationalism. Since 2022, following the Russian invasion of Ukraine, a war has been raging on the European continent, the biggest conflict since the Second World War. Europeans increasingly seek for protections from national politicians who want to retreat behind our borders. Rather, Europe still feels like a pleasant holiday destination. The institutions in Brussels are far from a bad show, or sometimes even a threat. Home still responds to the borders of your own country, where you recognize the language and it all feels familiar. So, what have we missed? How can it be that this dream no longer seems to appeal to a part of the population and a vote from nationalism seems more attractive than ever? In the book of today's discussion, The Enlargement, one of the main characters asks himself, how come that there is a lack of enthusiasm for Europe? Well, dear Europeans, let's take this moment to look in the mirror of the past. First of all, we should acknowledge that too long the efforts of European integration has been described by politicians in euros and the percentage of economic growth. Too long has European cooperation been described as nice to have but not unmissable. And too long has Brussels been used as a way to defend the national interest. We failed to create a genuine connection between Europeans, as we don't fall in love with the internal market or the language of political cooperation. Above all, we failed to make Europe a feeling. And now, in times of war and rising nationalism, we see the continent changing, and thus we need to change the story of Europe. We will have to learn to use the language of emotion, as it should become a feeling to be European, so there's a stronger sense of belonging between the Dutch and the Poles, from the French and the Albanians to Italians and the people from Ukraine. And that feeling is precisely what we need for a resistant, forward-looking union. Europe will have to live in the heart of Europeans. So, no minute to lose. Let's build this story then. How can we stimulate this feeling of European unity? First, we should look in another way to Europe, not with a 19th century view as a continent which consists of separate islands, as a collection of the Dutch, the French, the Greeks, the Lithuanians and Scots, with a focus on the different languages, mentalities and cultures. It is time for a 21st century view of Europe. We are politically, economically and also culturally connected as Europeans, and besides our differences, we also share a common past and hopefully also a common future. Over time, we Europeans have become increasingly connected, but what do we know about each other? To fill this gap, we should use the language of history and culture. Because if you're asking what is this story of a common history and culture then, well, the heritage of Europe can be seen around us in every village, city or country. We can find in the cafes, the museums and the street corners of Budapest, London, Madrid and Copenhagen. We can find in the churches, the monasteries, the castles, but also in the tapestry of the different battlefields and the horror of the concentration camps. Our histories are intertwined, and throughout the past, we constantly learned and copied from each other. From the national monuments, which had set our shared European experiences in stone, to the way we built our cities, music halls, and the stories of the books we read. This isn't only a story from the past, or this shouldn't be only a story from the past. We should also create connections for a time now. Europe should not only be experienced when you're crossing borders, but we should bring this feeling of connection home, literally. Why? For example, is there not yet a European news page with an online community where Europeans can discuss current affairs from home? And where is the European talk show, where different Europeans are seated around the table to discuss, with a translation system, the common challenges of our time? Or a European media channel where we can jointly watch Polish rom-coms, Swedish music performances, and Italian and British crime series passing by, accessible from every corner of the continent. Yet, this feeling of European unity does not only belong to the kingdom of dreams, but has become more and more a necessity. Putin's invasion of Ukraine has opened the box of Pandora, as we currently do not know when or else how it will be closed. For the current generation of Europeans, especially those born after the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, it represents a new chapter in European history. We woke up in a new reality, whether we want it or not. And we will have to hold on to each other as we are witnessing the return of history. Our time is pedaling in between dreams and nightmares. Dear Europe, I would like to conclude. Because it is you, Europe, one of the smallest continents of the world, you who have created one of the most beautiful pieces of art, literature and ideas, but on the other hand brought an unprecedented scale of destruction on this continent and in the rest of the world. It is you, Europe, which has a bigger story to tell than currently has been told. And we need more dreamers, creative stories and literature like the Enlargement of Robert Menasse. And even though we Europeans might be divided by mental and physical borders, language barriers and other differences, we are even more strongly linked by our strive for unity in the past and the present. And we need to talk about this as equals, not as strangers, but as friends from the past and the present, not only as Dutchmen, Poles or Spaniards, but also as Europeans. And it is this dream, this position between fear and hope, that outlines our common future. So that in a few years, decades or centuries, this sense of Europe is not just a dream by a few, but proves to be a reality by the many. So that together we live the dream again as Europeans. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. You write that we failed to make Europe a feeling and that literature perhaps can fill that gap. Can you tell why Europe does invoke a feeling for you?
Well, for me it started when I did an Erasmus exchange in Paris, like in 2017. And there it was like the beginning of becoming a feeling. Before it was indeed Europe has some economic advantages. We all know it, political stuff. And there I met some other European feelings. Well, we have our differences. Like currently at the moment, you also need to discuss in English. It's not your mother tongue. If you go to another place, you have differences in temperature, cultural differences. But there I saw some things we have in common. And I think that is the dream stuff. Like, there's an old idea that we feel connected with each other, which was also in the 19th century, where people say, wow, how beautiful would it be that you're not only French or Dutch or Spanish, but also European. So that is one part how it became for me. And I think the other side is that it is not only a dream, because we need to avoid that the dream becomes a nightmare. Because we also have, what's currently going on is that we are like, we need to work each other. It's not like, oh, how beautiful should it be? No, we are like dependent from each other. And not only now, but like also for the future, because we don't know how the Ukraine war will end. And like we have seen Brexit, we have seen the Corona crisis. That was like a sign, all right, this is an historic event which is going on. But now it is the time that we should, like, as Europeans, work together. And I think that is the political part. And you can't explain, I think, or like convince people only with political ideas. It should also be more of a cultural idea, more of a cultural story you're sharing. For instance, last week I was here in Pathé Tuschinski, which is a cinema, which has been built by a Polish who fled from Poland to here to buy a cinema or to create a cinema. And there I watched the new movie about Auschwitz, Zone of Interest. And the tragedy is that the builder, Tuschinski itself, also passed away in Auschwitz. So I think that is something, one of the aspects of the European culture which can be beautiful but also quite cruel. And I think that that's something we should like use more to become it more of a feeling that it isn't only about euros, or indeed it is important that our trucks can drive to Albania and Poland, etc. But that we should feel more connected, but also out of necessity.
Yes. We've talked about the lack of courage of politicians. Do you feel that this feeling fueled by literature and culture could make it easier for politicians, or is that too instrumental a look at literature?
I'm not interested in. Politicians are producing their disasters, and I'm writing my literature.
Not on your own, not just your literature, but also others.
No. There's no hope. I have a fixed idea. I guess I got it from Balzac, who said, try to tell the way that your contemporaneans are reconnaissing themselves, and later generations can understand us. And this is what I'm trying. I want to try to tell how it is going on today. Yeah? And I understand that European Union is producing a general situation which is interfering in every one of our lives. And so I try to tell this with all the things I try to tell about the contemporary biographies. The difference between me and other contemporary novelists is that I understand that European Union matters. And I have no hope that the generation of politicians I see around, not around me, there, yeah. I have no hope that they are able to understand the actual necessities.
And you almost mentioned the war against Ukraine.
Yeah.
Somehow, in a way, that was hopeful in a sense that I felt that people in the European Union politicians in the European Union were more aware. But you've also lost hope there?
This is a very dialectic and very complicated situation. I admire how Ukrainian people are defending themselves, because it's clear they don't want to live in a Putin dictatorship. Yeah? I'm coming from Austria. I know what happened when an aggressor invaded Austria and nobody defeated Austria, nobody reacted. Yeah? But on the other hand, I have no answer. On the other hand, it is completely crazy, in my opinion, for the peace project European Union to offer European membership to a country which is in war, without knowing how will this country be defined after the war, if there come a kind of peace afterwards. What are the borders of this country? What will be the conditions of this peace? How will the sovereignty of the Ukraine will be granted? Nobody knows nothing about the result of this war. The simple fact is, peace project European Union is offering membership to a country in peace, in war. And the other problem is, before the war, Ukraine was a state in construction. Now it is a nation in nation building, with the hero narratives of this defending of this country and so on, and how the people are suffering for defending freedom. These are the stories which are the base of future nationalistic identity. We are the hero country. Ukraine wasn't it before. Ukraine was a confused state trying to make a statewide constitution. But after the war, to say this new emphatic nation will be member state of the post-national development of the European Union is crazy. I admire how they defend themselves. I understand it. I would have wished that Austria has defended itself as well against Hitler when the aggressor came. But in this concrete case, I would simply wait. You can't say how it will be in 5 years, in 10 years. You don't know. Wait. But...
And you don't think it's defending European values? You don't...
They don't defend European values. They defend themselves. European values are the, what is the English word for Bodenschätze?
Resources.
Yeah. The resources in the underground of the Ukrainian state. Yeah. The biggest resources of seltene Erden is in the Ukraine. They are defending European values. Yeah? But I understand very, really deeply in my soul that Ukrainians defending militarily themselves against the Russian aggressor, they are defending themselves, they are defending their lives, they are defending their imagination of freedom, they are defending their expectations of a free democratic state and so on. They are defending themselves. But to say they're defending European values, this is an outsourcing of the European Commission, which is not able to define what are European values. Yeah? Because if we would in Europe take serious European values, then, for example, Julian Assange would have asylum in Europe and not expecting deportation to the United States where he will die, because he is the man who defended freedom, liberty of medias and press informations. He discovered war crimes, and the man who showed proved war crimes cannot become asylum in the peace project with all his values in the European Union. I'm not interested in European values. I want to have them realized after a more rational and based on the ideas of the founder generation constructed European Union. Now it is phrase and phrase.
If I may react on that.
Sure.
I think that it is worse than just Ukraine defending its own country. I think it is really, they are defending European freedom, as I think that also based on historic grounds that especially Eastern or Central European countries were already making the point that Putin wasn't only looking to Ukraine. So if you say you're only fighting for Ukraine, you accept that he only wants Ukraine. But we don't know at the moment. He called it like one of the biggest mistakes. The fall of the Soviet Union, he called it one of the biggest mistakes of the 20th century. So I think it's the other way around, that we are outsourcing defending our freedom, which has been defended at the moment by Ukraine. Because what Putin is doing is like an assault on like the structure of European countries, which has been built after the Second World War, which have been built after the fall of the Berlin Wall. And I think that should be also more like pronounced by politicians, that it is not only a problem of a state which has been caught by a state who wants a bigger piece of the cake, but he is looking like more pieces of the cake. Yeah. And I think that's also for politicians to say better that the risk is quite high, that we don't know what will be the next step if Kiev is losing, or what will be happening for Europe if Trump is going to win this November. So that's what I mean with the return of history, is that we don't know how it's going to happen, and it, especially the Netherlands with all its economic connections with other European countries and also political scene, that will be quite horrendous if we need to pay more for defense, etc. But we are paying for freedom also. That is what's the difference with before, and I think that's a change. What we see here in the Netherlands is before, which is quite important for the Netherlands, namely money. First, it was Europe was a market. And now you see from the last moments of years, it also has become more of safety. And that is a change where for politicians, Europe has become more important. And I think that also for this generation, that is also more important to acknowledge that things might be changing. And also for the European Union, like, what are you going to do in this situation when you don't know what will be the future? If you say indeed, well, we will give you 5 years to think about it, well, that might also be the same for Georgia, where you also say, well, we're not. If you would ask 10 years ago, like, would you like to have other member states like participating in this project? They would say, well, perhaps in 10 years. But that's what I mean with times are changing. So you have to act more based on the first wave of history and then on politics. So that is something the union should do, I would say, or needs to learn, like, how to act with history with a capital letter, and then follows politics. And I think that's something new.
Yes.
If I may react, and maybe also bring together your both points, because I think this is interesting. You presented just a very dynamic development of Europe and how ideally Europe should develop, just following what's going on. On the other hand, I hear you saying about the founding fathers, who might have had a certain vision, but then the question is, maybe that vision was too static or not passed enough to the next generations, so it wasn't really communicated, because we are still not sure what is European Union. So what is this idea that you wrote the letter about? What should we be like European? I recognize in your story the Erasmus part. That's, I think, one of the biggest success of European Union. Millions of young Europeans traveling from country to country and learning about each other.
This is an excellent example. And now we will go back to reality. I tell it. I'm a writer, I'm a novelist. I tell these stories. Erasmus is an enormous success based on a really excellent idea of the European unification. Okay. Europe reached to the point that, for example, an Austrian female student can go to a Spanish university as well as a Czech student, and they can meet and so on. It's wonderful. When I was a student, I wanted to pass a guest semester in the University of Berlin because I wanted to go away from grey and triste Vienna, where I had no success by girls. I thought, let's go to Berlin, and it's more free and sexual freed and so on. It was in those times not possible for an Austrian student to study 1 semester or 1 year in Germany with the same language. Yeah. I had to go to the Fremdenpolizei. Yeah, I don't even know the English word for it. Yeah. You had to say which German citizen is ready to depose 50,000 German mark security if you make costs to the German state. And so I did not know nobody who could pay 50,000 mark for me studying in Berlin. Yeah? And then they said, and whatever you studied before in Vienna, we don't accept it, and what you study here in Vienna will not be accepted. Okay, I said, I understood. I go back to Vienna, and I finished my studies in Vienna, and so on. So, today, Erasmus and the unification program of the European universities, it is a big progress. Okay. A German or an Austrian, anyway, a Viennese student gets an Erasmus scholarship in Madrid, Spain. A female Viennese student, Erasmus in thing. It is possible. What was not possible for me? She can study in other country, Madrid. There she meets a Czech student with Erasmus scholarship as well in Madrid. They fall in love. Suddenly a child is on the way. And then it needs more, between 8 or 10 years, if the nationality of the mother, the nationality of the father, or the nationality of the birthplace defines who is paying the children money. And this is the other side of the reality. And I said it before. We made progress that you can study today with Erasmus and in other countries. What I was not able to do is a progress. And then suddenly the national interest, the national identity, the national idiotics are capturing the same thing, and they say, okay, go back, and we are not responsible, yeah, and so on. And this is another example for the same contradiction. We made progress, and then suddenly we have the contradiction, and this is the moment where the story is ending. Yeah? And I know what I am telling. I am describing biographies like this, and in a concrete case, for example, the decision who is responsible for the money of the baby was decided when the baby came to school. This is the other side of Europe. And therefore, I always say, we have to go consequently further the way we started.
But nationalism always pops up and limits.
It was an enormous progress. And then it stopped, and nobody cares. Only the victims of the situation. And I'm telling them their stories.
If I may,
sure.
Because actually I wanted to make a little bit broader point. It's true indeed, so the national regulations are still installed. So even if we have millions of Erasmus babies, because that's actually the term for all these mixed couples who have babies, they are still bound to national regulations. But what I wanted to say is we have millions of Europeans who have been outside of their countries, but we have perhaps billions of Europeans who have never left their national countries. So to spread the idea of Europe, you also have to reach those people, because me and Thomas, we've been indeed in the same situations, meeting other Europeans, learning about how similar and dissimilar we are. But there are a lot of people who are never confronted with the question.
I understand perfectly people who don't want to go away from their country. The problem is different. People who are, and this is okay, were born in a certain place, growing up in a certain place, are working in a certain place, are dying in a certain place, and have no idea and no wish to go to another place, that they don't avoid that others can take their chances. Yeah? Politics can't orientate themselves on those who are not interested in anything. You have the chance, you don't be interested, okay. You have the chance, you are interested, you should have all advantages of this chance. It's so easy. Yeah? But national politics is orientated on those who are never moving or changing their place of life. And on the other hand, in Vienna, 30% of the population of Vienna, 30%, working there, paying taxes there, can't vote. This is not normal. This has nothing to do with European democracy. If we want to have a democratic Europe, we have to take care about all these little phenomena. Every little thing. We don't feel it. I'm living in Europe. When there is an election, I get the information, you have to go to this place and you take this number and then you can vote. I don't feel the deficit. But if I am interested, if I want to know, I'm suddenly seeing that 30% of the population of Vienna has no right to vote. And European politics, European engagement, European interests should care about all these deficits. And so we could elaborate a better Europe.
And I also think if you look at the facts of indeed, like people who travel or go to another European country, it's like 15 million on 415 million Europeans, like 3%. So it's not much. But what changed is that despite even not leaving your borders, we are connected. Like if we're all sitting just here in the country, but we all pay with a euro, it depends if another Eurozone country has deficits. It depends if here in the Netherlands there is tax evasion, so other Southern European countries miss money. It depends if we're paying like defense expenditures ourselves. So despite, well, not even leaving your country, we are still connected. And I think indeed that there is a contradiction that despite that, so our challenges have become European, that indeed on the European democracy level, which is still national, because we are in June, as we all know. In June we can vote for the European Parliament, but we can only vote for the national parties. So there aren't transnational lists. So there is a chance there to make more of a European debate about stuff. And that's also why I mentioned the media channel, that kind of stuff, and the talk show, is that we need European debates. It's also what you said in the beginning. We need to, and that's a quote of Jean Monnet, who said we don't like gather together like states, but to reunite people. And the last couple of decades, we forget the people part. And the people, I mean the European citizens, who are European citizens because they have a European passport, but who aren't really feeling the thing that we are indeed connected with someone from Ireland or someone from Ukraine now or someone from Poland. You can call all the countries. And I think that's something we need to change, to bring it more to a European debate, and also not forgetting that's the contradiction in Europe itself. It's also European that we need to cross borders, but we also feel national connected. And I don't think that we should erase the national connected part, but I think that's something we should combine so that you can feel yourself Dutch or French or Spanish, but also like feel European connected. So nationalism shouldn't be a word to erase from the diary, but we should feel it in another world, another way, which isn't like a more inclusive version of nationalism, which is being proud on your country and not trying to push away other people. And that's called more patriotism. And nationalism is more indeed of we don't want other people. And I think that's something which is
very, very nice European manifest I underwrite. The only thing I don't understand is what it means to be proud on his country. This I don't understand. Nothing what I did led to the being of this country. I was born, it was not my decision. And suddenly I am in a country and have a nationality, and then I have to be proud. Why? I don't understand.
Well, you can also love your country, right?
I underwrite your European manifest, but I cut away this proud of the country, and I suggest to make a preamble. We nothing did for our national identity. It was chance. We had luck. It's better to be born in Netherlands than in Angola, for example. Mm-hmm. We had luck, and this luck means a certain responsibility. And we want to fulfill the idea, finally, the idea of the French Revolution, of equality, democracy, brotherhood, peace. And this is our responsibility, and if we are able to do so, then we can be proud.
I was very afraid you were completely lost all hope, but I think that we found a last spark. I have time for 2 or 3 questions from the audience. I'll come to you.
I'll speak English, but I start in German because I'm a European. Robert, in deine 2 Bücher über Europa spielen die Medien eine ganz kleine Rolle. Hast du irgendwie eine Hoffnung, dass Medien oder Medienpersonalities eine Rolle spielen können? Do the media, I don't see a big role of the media in your books. They are there. Do you have an idea about the role of the media in this process, and is there any hope from the media?
I don't have hope, and it's not the goal of my work to have to develop motives for hope. I'm telling how it is, yeah. And if it's a medial disaster, I tell the story. Hopefully, not as a writer, as a citizen, things will become better and continue in a rational way to better situation. But hope is not a category for me.
I would like to go back to the passage of your book, which was read in the beginning of the evening, which contained this dialogue about minorities and possible majorities in Albania and Poland. And do you agree that this basic fear, which is underlying all these dialogues, which we have been discussing tonight also, fear of losing identity? Because our identities have been defined by being a member of a state, and now all of a sudden we say, okay, let's have peace and stop the expression of nationalism, which was war. And now where we are, I think it's the basic psychology, the social psychology of Europe at the moment is of disorientation, because every political party which uses that to draw votes is gaining at the moment.
Is it a question to me? You address this question to the wrong man, because I'm really deeply unable to understand the item national identity or identity. Nobody of you all here has one identity. It's impossible. And the most crazy part of your multiple identity is the national identity. I give you, if I am allowed, an example on my own person. I'm Viennese. Viennese is what we call in German, for me, Heimat. I don't know an English synonym. Heimat. Heimat is something where you understand more than on any other place, because you grew up, you understand the codes, you understand the sounds in the way how people speak. They say, I'm so hungry, but he says it in a way that it means I have no hunger. For example, do you understand these things? Heimat is a place where you get angry very fast. When you are completely fast angry, you are at home. Because on another place you say, I'm not interested. They have a problem here, I go back tomorrow. Yeah. Where you are angry, there is your home. Yeah. Yeah, this is the way, how it is. This is part of your identity. You see certain colors in the air. You have certain moments in your nose, and you think, there's no other place where I can smell exactly this. This makes your identity, or can be part of your identity. Okay, nation, can you expect all this, what I said now, from your nation? I have the same passport than a Tyrolean. I don't understand them. They have a lot of mountains. In my opinion, if you live in a country where you have 2,000 meters high mountains, you get crazy. It's not my case. I can imagine, because my wife wants to do it, to go 3 days skiing there. But everything is white, and I go down, and then we have a nice dinner, and then I go home to Vienna. But the same passport, what means it? I can have good friends in Tyrol, but they are friends not because we have the same passport. They are friends because they are interesting persons, human beings. What is my identity? I'm a Viennese, I'm a European. I lived 4 years in Brussels, I lived 4 years in Amsterdam, I lived 8 years in São Paulo, Brazil. I lived a lot of my adult life in foreign places. And I'm a genius in integration. Really, believe me. But then I went back and I was at home in Vienna. Nation? You're kidding me. Yeah? National identity is a fiction. Heimat is a human right. And the European idea is therefore so genius because it explains to all the biographies of European human beings to have Heimat and a general state of law of the whole continent. That means you know where you are at home, but when you, for reasons They are very individual and very by chance and so on, go to another place for working there, or I look at you and I imagine I'm a beautiful woman, and as a woman I say to you, you are the man of my dreams. And then you go with this woman to her place in, let's say, in Tiflis, or in Genoa, or wherever. You know that there you have the same rights and the same chances as in your home state or your home city, in your Heimat. Yeah? And if we look now to the European contemporanean situation, do you understand, really, deeply, that for the same work you get a different salary depending where are you doing this work in Europe, if you're doing it in Bucharest or in Berlin or in Amsterdam? Do you understand that for doing the same work, for doing the same way of engaged making your life, you get retirement pension, which is not enough for survive on this point in Europe, and 3 times more in another point of Europe? Heimat, I explained it to you. Nation, forget it. Equality, democracy, chances of life are defined by the same conditions for the same jobs, the same works, for the same taxes. And now, this beautiful woman looking at you, you are the man of my life, says, let's live in my city, and you know it's not Heimat, but it can be Heimat because it has the same conditions of life for all Europeans, and it doesn't matter, is it this country, is it this city or another city. And this is the real and the concrete utopia of Europe. And we started this process, a way to continue.
Thank you so much, Robert Menasse. Thank you, Thomas Hüttinga, Ivona Guc. We didn't get to go and speak about the upcoming European elections in depth, but at the Balie we will be talking about it for a long time, during many programs, hopefully to make this European utopia a little bit more concrete.
I hope that we speak more about my novel.
Fair enough. Well, you can read it and you can buy it and outside, because it's very much worth reading. Thank you so much for coming.
Yes. Thank you.